I am supposed to remind folks, so if there's any folks in here, folks, to check the Lightpost app, open it up on your phone, and check yourself in. Does everyone know how to do that? Your own attendance?
I may have checked them in.
Well, you may already be checked in.
Yeah, I'm already checked in. I never touched it.
Well, that's magic. All right. So we are going to be in Isaiah chapter 28 and 29 tonight. Last week I was here, we did an overview just to catch some people up. I know some people have been teaching other classes and in other classes, so it's kind of a new quarter. But we're still in Isaiah because you don't go through Isaiah in one quarter. So we're in Isaiah chapter 28. Can anyone tell me what is a major theme of the book of Isaiah we've talked about so far? I'm going to come with this question every time, so you might as well just be thinking about it. Okay, God's holiness and justice. I see some notes coming out. Yeah, see, that's the benefit of keeping notes in your Bible. I'll keep this here. Here, I'll put that right here, just in case. God's holiness and justice. What scene in Isaiah really demonstrates God's holiness? What's a picture in Isaiah that demonstrates God's holiness? It's a famous one. Anyone? Isaiah's in it. He's before something. He falls down. Man, I'm leaving. That's just he's in the throne room scene, right? Isaiah chapter 6, where the angels are singing, "Holy, holy, holy," right? And what we're seeing is the fact that there is this presence or pressure that the holiness of God has put on Isaiah, where he feels like he is undone. He falls down before. He's not worthy, right? And so consistently in this book, there is this constant gravitation towards worthiness, right? And that includes justice. What is justice, by the way? He said holiness and justice, which are holiness, justice comes from God's holiness. What is justice?
If you're doing something wrong,
The what?
if you did something wrong and you're either punished for it or you did something good or what.
Okay.
So justice would depend on whether you're good or bad.
So sort of like a weights and balance, right? If you do something wrong, punishment comes, but it's also there to protect you and to reward when you do something right.
Is it like a deserved outcome?
Justice can be a deserved outcome, but it's also often used about we are supposed to do justice. Now, how do you do justice? And it normally heavily is weighted toward one group of people. Huh? The poor. Why? Why should justice be weighted toward the poor? Huh? Toward the poor. 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 The poor. Get a little French guy up here. We'll get real creative with it. What?
Carries the connotation of the law, and therefore doing justice is doing anything or everything in accordance with the law.
Okay, so there's... Yeah, so law and justice go hand in hand. Keeping law, right, is how you protect justice so that the world and communities and, families, everybody kind of has the same rules and everybody knows what to expect. When my kids get a whop upside the head, what's that for? Well, you know what that was for, right? I don't just come up, well, sometimes I do actually, I don't normally, hard, in punishment, come up and whop them upside the head. They were doing something to, cause that.
We have the concept of a two-tiered justice system, and what they mean by that is if you don't have money, you can't afford justice. And so in God's eyes, the poor can't afford to buy their way out of things, so justice is has to be demanded for them, because corrupt judges were one of the abominations that God hated, for scales to be unequal based on your income level.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why back in Exodus and Leviticus, he repeats the phrase of when you install a judge, make sure it's a judge who will not accept a bribe, cannot be bribed. Now, if you have judges that cannot be bribed, justice works. Justice works really well, right? But unfortunately, we've talked about this, and I'm not going to go too far into this. We talk about the idea that justice a lot of times have penalties that come with it, right? You kill someone's ox, what do you owe them? An ox. What if you don't own an ox? Right? And so there are lesser payments for the poor, right? Even in offerings, right? There are certain offerings, but the poor can't keep up with some of the offerings that the Bible asks them to do, right? And so there is a lesser offering, lesser gift. That's justice. Making sure not only that everybody's playing by the same rules, but that everybody can play by them equally. And those are not the same thing. You can have the same rules, but not everybody can play by them equally. And I always use the, paying a ticket for speeding kind of analogy, right? If a speeding ticket costs too much money, who will never be able to pay that? The poor. If it costs too little money, who's going to, right? Nobody cares about keeping it. So there's a balance that has to kind of be made. And unfortunately with rulers, when you're dealing with the poor always have to have kind of, when I say special exceptions, special attention to give into their situation, not so that they can get out of jail free, right? Not so that they can do whatever they want, just so that one mistake doesn't put them into a world of hurt so much so they can never come out of it. Now, unfortunately, what Isaiah shows us over and over and over again, and we're going to see this again, judges love the fact that there are people who they can indebt to them with levies or, with fines, with punishments. They love the fact that there are people that now owe them, and they use that to their advantage. And those rulers, God does not care for. That's actually one of the final things that God looks at when the poor start to become bargaining chips, when the poor start just kind of being used by the rich in a way that is completely unethical. That's when God starts going, no, we're not doing this anymore. Okay? And so that's justice. All right, so I just want to get us thinking about some things. I don't know if this is distracting you or not, but my daughter said, welcome to Lenore City here. So we're in chapter 28. Somebody read the first 6 verses of Isaiah 28. Now we're talking, just so while you're listening, while we're reading, we're talking about Ephraim. And Ephraim is a symbol for Samaria, so we're speaking of the 10 northern tribes. And there's this pride that Samaria has built. There's this pride that Ephraim has built, okay? And it's going to interfere with their relationship with God. So somebody read the first 6 verses of Isaiah 28. Who wants it?
I'll do it.
All right.
Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, shall be trodden under feet, and the glorious beauty, which is on the head of the fat valley, shall be a fading flower, and as the hasty fruit before the summer, which when he that looketh upon it sees, while it is yet in his hand, he
All right.
eats it up.
Stop right there for a moment. So Ephraim is called the crown of what?
Pride.
Crown of pride, or proud crown. Okay? Now, does anyone know where, and Ephraim is in Samaria, so Samaria, we're speaking of Samaria. Does anyone know the geographical location of Samaria and why they may have had some pride in it?
Well, they were the northernmost area.
Northernmost area?
I think so.
And remember, they had their own hill. Remember, in the Samaritan woman, whose hill are we to worship on? She's a Samaritan in Samaria. Now, Samaria itself, the hill, is a very fertile hill. It's actually one of the best places in that area to grow grapes, to grow vines, to have a vineyard. And so whenever you have pride in where you live, your city, you know, they have their own vineyard, they obviously can drink, right, and not have to, you know, it's probably very cheap compared to having it exported out, right? So like in the book of Revelation, God will sometimes use what that city is about, what that city is good at, what that city has that is abundant, and use it as an attack against himself. Whenever a city can be self-sustained, especially in a religious setting, who do they normally neglect? They normally neglect God, and who do they build up and emphasize? Themselves, right? So they've got this pride in this crown, in this vineyard, but they've become drunk off their pride, okay? They've become, and I don't want us to always see every time you see the word drunk that he's talking about, look, they were drinking. He's using a lot of times these words as symbols to represent they were drunk off their pride. You ever met somebody who's a little too drunk off their own pride, a little too full of themselves, a little too into themselves, right? What happens when that person is criticized in any way? Not a pleasant experience, right? Does that person usually behave in such a way that is for the benefit of others? Only if there's some kind of benefit for themselves. And so what we're going to be seeing is that Ephraim and Samaria, there will be some things that they will do, and there will be an appearance of religion. There will be appearance of righteousness. There will be appearance of goodness. But God's saying, I see what's happening, and that crown that you have, it's fading. It's fading, right? Because what happens when they stop getting acknowledged for their good, and rewarded for their good, and praised for their good? What happens to those types of people? They stop doing good. They will seek attention elsewhere. And a lot of times, what's an easy way, especially in politics, when you have power, what's an easy way to seek attention? Doing something bad. Are the news full of all the good things that are going on in the world? Right? When you turn on the news, are you going to find the little old lady who was helped across the street? Right? You've got to go to like other networks, right? You've got to find sub-networks. And every now and then they'll throw a good one out. But most of the day, if you turn on the news, I guarantee 99% of the time it's going to be something drastic. Headline, right? And the headline's probably going to be way worse than what actually is going on. Well, you know, they may not have had the news network like that, but do you think that's something new that's under the sun? That's not new, right? And so they are drunk off their ability to be self-sustained. They are drunk off their ability to, you know, kind of have this valley which they have, but unfortunately, they're about to be trodden underfoot. Now for Samaria, who's going to be the nation that comes against the northern tribes? Assyria, right? So Assyria is going to come. And what we're going to see throughout this chapter particularly is that Samaria is going to do a whole lot of whining. Okay? They're going to do a whole lot of whining. They're going to do a whole lot of complaining. And they're going to, and one of the things we're going to see, they're going to give up clear teaching and revelation, clear understanding. Hey, what must we do? Assyria's coming. Syria's attacking us. What must we do? A prophet comes. Here's what you got to do. Very clear, plain. They'll reject it. They'll rebel against it. And guess what they'll be offered? A foreign tongue. Good luck in Assyria, learning a foreign language under a foreign tongue and looking for clear instruction. Okay? So you finished what in verse 4? Now read verses 5 and 6. Finish those off.
In that day shall the Lord of hosts be for a crown of glory, and for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of his people, and for a spirit of judgment to him that sitteth on the judgment, and for strength to them that turn the battle to the gate.
So we got a spirit of justice, judgment, and strength, which is what we brought up. God is offering, right? Yes, you guys, and this is God's constant theme. Yes, you're going to be trodden underfoot. Yes, your pride is going to cause your downfall. But who's always glorified in this every time? Good or bad? God is. God takes glory when evil is punished. God takes the glory. I mean, why would God glorify, or why would God be gloried when somebody is punished? What glory does that have for anybody? Justice. And who does justice serve? Does it serve God? It serves people. I mean, nobody really wants to talk about punishment, but nobody wants their neighbor to steal the stuff off their lawn. And they want somebody to show up and do what? To punish, right? And so, yes, God sometimes has to be harsh in his punishment, but the purpose is so that everybody else can thrive. There are people who are not thriving. There are people who are suffering. And so God says, I need to relieve those who are suffering and going through it. And so God gets glorified because the people who are receiving relief, they should glorify God. What often happens even when God rescues his own people? They murmur and complain. Why'd you wait so long? Right, think about Egypt. Remember when they were brought out of Egypt? And they were delivered? That's why that term is used. Delivered from Egypt? We want to go back. So this leadership, this is why leadership is so crucial. Can leadership influence and infect the people? To where everybody kind of buys into the status quo. Everybody kind of buys in, hey, we know they mistreat us, but there's some benefit we get out of it. And it's what I've always known. And a lot of people would rather the boat not to be rocked, wouldn't they? Because when God acts and he rocks the boat, who does it affect? It affects everybody. And it's an upheaval. And it's not a fun situation. But God says sometimes it's necessary, right? You've got to rock the boat. You can't just let things continue to go. All right, any questions? Why does pride blind? It's a question in this section. Why does pride, what's so blinding about pride?
It lets you see only what you want to see.
Okay, only sees what you want to see.
Can't see beyond yourself.
Can't see beyond yourself. All right, so part of it is usually a prideful person, can they ever see the thing they did as wrong? It's like, what do you mean? There's always what? An excuse or a justification, right? Sometimes we'll talk about the ends justifies the means. If the end is really good, the end result is great. I'll do whatever it takes, do whatever's necessary to get there. And so oftentimes they can't see past themselves, right? Which means everything they do is for themselves. They can't see the hurt of others. Right? A prideful person is not going to see the pain that they may be causing. But the biggest blindness is the dependency on God. When you are full of pride, you're not dependent upon God. It's not that God is not in your life. And I want us to get this across. It's not that these people give up God entirely. God becomes a bargaining chip. God becomes a thing that, how can I use God to my advantage? And isn't religion, aren't there religions like that? Can't religion become under the guise of, someone was asking me the other day, I was like, man, if I really wanted to get rich, you know what I'd do? I'd start a church. I would. I'd start my own church because I couldn't do it the right way and make a whole lot of money. But I'd start a church, and I'd be the head guy. And I'm telling you right now, I started coming up with a plan. I'm not going to do it, by the way. But we were going through what I would need and what it would take and how much, what we could do. Oh my, the money that could be made starting a church. A lot of people do that to start let's get out of the religious section for a moment. How many organizations do you know that have been created in the name of good? We're going to go and do this thing. And then you come to find out like 97% of the donations don't even go to the fund. And you're kind of like, and now the brochures and the pictures steal your heart, right, of the little kids over in Africa, break you. And then you're like, well, I gave, $10. How much of my $10 went to a child? 97 cents. Because we had to pay this guy to do this, and this guy to do this, this guy to do this. It's like, I don't know about that, right? And so that's what Israel is doing. Hey, we are the religious power. We are the religious leader, or Samaria. We are the religious leader. Look at us. God has blessed us. This goes back to that. Whenever a city is doing well, they believe what? If you're doing well, then God must be okay with you. God must be blessing you. And we have that in today's world. There's a lot of people who can't see their sin because if I'm so bad, why is God letting me do it? Why are all these blessings coming my way? Blessings by themselves have nothing to do with your sin or your righteousness. Okay? Our physical blessings. Okay? All right, so someone read 7 through 13. This is kind of where we get into that foreign tongue thing. This section is going to expose the Jewish leaders for Judah. They're just like those in Samaria. Who wants to read?
These also reel with wine and stagger with strong drink. The priest and the prophet reel with strong drink. They are swallowed by wine. They stagger with strong drink and reel in vision. They stumble in giving judgment, for all the tables are full of filthy vomit.
All right, let's stop right there for a moment. All the tables are full of what?
Vomit.
Filthy vomit. The priests and the prophets, they reel, or they give revelation. It says they err in vision, and they stumble in judgment. What does that mean, to err in vision? You're speaking of priests and prophets, to err in vision. What does that mean? So there can be false prophecy, right? So there are some who take this, they're receiving visions, they're receiving prophecies, and they're telling, right? They're kind of going back to the 400 prophets of Baal kind of stuff, right? They're just making up it as they go. There's that. What other ways can a leader err in vision, who may be a prophet and a priest? Yeah, so wrong motives, right? And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about. They have a vision, a plan, right? So the Hebrew term could either be vision as in you just saw a vision, or it can be vision in the sense of you're creating a vision.
There's the idea of part of the pun, or the euphemism, beer goggles is always a term. Those who drink too much will find that an ugly woman becomes attractive when you drink.
I was waiting for you to explain that because I never...
Like the military, that's what we call it.
Okay. us pure individuals. Yeah, right? You start, and once you, and getting back to being intoxicated, right, and drunk, right, you don't have to be drunk on wine to make wrong decisions. Drunkenness in Scripture is about not being in your right mind. And have you ever met somebody or someone you know, and they do something, and you go, are you out of your mind? Right? A lot of times when you get to that point where you can see somebody doing something, where you're making that kind of a statement, what has gone on in the last couple of days in their life, stress, anxiety, whatever it may be, and they go and blow up and they go and do this, you're like, what happened? Well, imagine a system that creates that kind of next generation over and over and over again in the leadership, right? The leaders are training the next leaders to be worse than themselves. And you get a couple generations down the road and God goes, are you out of your mind? At the table, it's filthy vomit. And the table is always representative of what the priests are offering, right? Now, specifically when it comes to priests, you can kind of transition this with Malachi. When they give offerings and sacrifices, what are they giving to God? This, like Malachi would have said, the lame and the blind, right? Right? You're giving the lame and the blind things you wouldn't even give to your own governor. But Isaiah's a little more intense. What you lay on the offer, it's not causing God to vomit. It is vomit. Right? So, but God's not the one vomiting here. They are bringing nothing. And actually, it's grotesque. Okay? That's what's going on in their life. And it's starting from the top. Okay. Sorry. I wanted to just kind of bring us through there. Now, keep reading in verse 9.
To whom will he teach knowledge, and to whom will he explain the message? Those who are weaned from the milk, those that are taken from the breast, for it is precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line. Here a little, there a little.
All right, pause. That's what the people are saying about Isaiah. Oh, who will teach us knowledge? Who is wise? All he brings is precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. What does that sound like? Sounds like baby mockery, doesn't it? Like a baby mocking. Why did the king Ahaz not want to go ask the one prophet to prophesy against him? He always says bad things about me. Everything he says is against me, right? I mean, everything he ever says makes me look bad. And have you ever gotten to we would call this a hobby horse, right? Riding a hobby horse. They're basically calling Isaiah out and saying, you ride a bunch of hobby horses. Precept, 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 line upon line, here a little, there a little, right? There's just this over-dramatized. Isaiah, he just has it out for us. He just has it out for us. It is just a bunch of wah, 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 wah. And it goes in one ear and out the other. Now, that's tough for people, isn't it? That's tough for a prideful person because Isaiah as the prophet, what is his job? It's to warn. And if you've been in my Isaiah class, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, how many times have we talked about the same stuff? We're in 28 chapters, and it's just rinse, recycle, repeat. Why is that? Because nothing's going through. Well, they're finally getting to a place where they're telling Isaiah, just stop. It's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Who are you to teach us knowledge? Right? Who are you to teach us knowledge? So keep reading. And here's where it's kind of cut to the quick here.
For by people of strange lips and with a foreign tongue, the Lord will speak to this people, to whom he has said, this is rest. Give rest to the weary, and this is repose, yet they would not hear. And the word of the Lord will be to them precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, and here a little, there a little, that they may go and fall backward and be broken and snared and taken.
So God says, this is the funny, this is the reversal. You think that's what I'm offering you? Okay, I'm going to give you to a foreigner. And I'm going to let the foreigners prophesy to you, and I'm going to give you over to foreigners, and they're going to give you what? Line upon line, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, right? Here a little, there a little. And what does he say at the very end? What will it be to them? That they may go, fall backward, be broken, snared, and taken. If you want to give up my clear teaching, clear, easy instruction, something that you can understand, but because you're rebellious and you don't want to hear it, I will give you a teaching. I will give you an authority figure, someone who will conquer you, and everything they tell you will mean nothing to you because now you're what? You're a slave. You're a slave. And you have no rights. You have no reason to rebel. You have nothing to rebel against because you're not even one of the people of the nation that you're going to be around. Have we heard the phrase, be careful what you ask for? Right? And this is a concept through Scripture. The measure by which you judge, you will be judged. The measure by which you do whatever, God says, okay, if this is what you want, this is what you desire, this is what you think I'm giving, I'll actually give that to you. Now, if you're Samaria, it's usually hindsight. When they go to captivity, you think they wished Isaiah would come back? Or prophets would come back and preach a little? Nobody wants to hear a message from God when they think they don't need it. But when they do need it, sometimes they're not there anymore to give it. Because your sin and what you've done have driven you away from, has driven a wedge in, and God is letting you go live in your rebellion, and now you can't even hear a word from the Lord, and everything you do hear is just garbled, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't help. There's no use for it. So, but God's not going to leave people like that. All right? So, let's look at verse 14. Someone read 14 down to 16.
Therefore hear the word of the Lord, who rule his people in Jerusalem. Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death and with Sheol. We have an agreement. When the overcoming whip passes, it will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste. And I will make justice the line, the righteousness.
All right, wait, pause there, 16. So it says they've made a covenant with Sheol. Now, in Jerusalem, right, we've kind of switched from Samaria. He uses Samaria always as what? As kind of an example of look what happened to them. Or look what's going to happen to them. Now he says, you in Jerusalem, you have made a covenant with Sheol. You think when the judgment comes that I'm going to bring, you are going to be sheltered from it. Now in the next chapter, or in chapter 37, we're going to see their shelter, their covenant is made with Egypt. They think human alliances is what's going to protect them. As if somehow God cannot defeat them, right? God cannot come against them. They cannot be defeated because they've kind of, right, sheltered themselves and buffered themselves and put in every protection. And they think, look, now we are untouchable. We are untouchable. This is man-made wisdom. thinking with all the, I'm sure all of the leaders of Israel got together in a room, right, had maps and had drawing boards, right? They had their Sharpies and Expos out and smart boards, and they were writing down ideas. What can we do to stay alive? And the best thing they came up with is, let's go align ourselves with Egypt. While who's outside the gate preaching a message? Repent and return. Repent and return. God is the cornerstone. His ways are sure. Go back and read the old scriptures, right? And see that when God says, do this, what happens every time? They're safe. They're secure. He is the cornerstone, right? His servant. He will send somebody. He always has. And so the answer, that's the funny thing about Israel, the answer is literally knocking at the door. And they're going, what must we do? Right? What do we need to do? How? And I'm sure they spent hours and hours and hours. And Isaiah's just sitting there going, return to God. Return to the Lord. He's the chief cornerstone. He's the righteous one. He will save you. He will bring you righteousness. Now, what would cause somebody to reject that message? What would cause somebody to go to Egypt rather than receive the simple truth of God? Pride. Not trusting in God. Oftentimes, to obey God, what must you do? Self last, but there's a whole lot of changing, isn't there? There's submission. There's admission. One, admitting that you're wrong. How many people like to do that? Right? I grew up in that generation where my dad apologized the next day through ignoring what happened the day before. That's how I knew that he was apologizing to me, was that we didn't talk about it anymore. Right? We're just going to move on. And what God is first wanting them to do before he'll let them move on is to say, we're wrong. That's the whole humble yourselves before the mighty hand of God. To humble yourselves, you must actually be humbled. Humble is not words. Humble comes from a heart, right? A broken and a contrite heart. That is when God can bring his Spirit in again and renew and refresh and restore somebody. But if they're not willing to admit it, nothing is going to happen. So they've made lies their refuge, falsehood they've taken shelter. And I've got a couple minutes. So someone read 17 through 19 real quick. This is what God's going to do, though, this is his cornerstone. This is his foundation.
I got it. And I will make justice the line and righteousness the plumb line, and hell will sweep away the refuge of lies, and water will overwhelm the shelter. Then your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. And the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be beaten down by it.
One more verse.
Oh, one more. And as often as it passed through, it will take you. For morning by morning it will pass through, by day and by night, and it will be sheer terror to understand the message.
So what is God's measuring line? Right? If God were to draw a line and say, this is what I require, this is what I want from people, and everybody who does this on this side are good, and this side is bad, and this thing right here is going to separate these people from these people. What does he say his measuring line is? Justice. Justice. So we need to get in our mind, what is biblical justice? What does justice mean? What does justice require of me to do justice? Okay? All right, we're going to pick up there next week, but we really want to get into chapter 29 and 30 so we can get into the ending of Isaiah. Thank you.